If you want a vision of the future, Winston, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever.
Flock cameras.
Flock cameras.
Flock safety.
An automatic license plate reader company used by over 5,000 law enforcement agencies in 49 states across the country. A web of mass surveillance.
Something that is not only not safe, it's unconstitutional.
We have a company working with governments to record the comings and goings of every single person in the country as if you and I and everyone else were potential criminals.
Over 100,000 cameras spread across almost every state, tracking license plates, collecting data at levels never seen before. Headed by a guy who strangely reminds me of Syndrome from The Incredibles, could be the start of a slippery slope towards a world without privacy. Here's why Flock is what George Orwell warned us about. To this day, Orwell's novel still scares the living daylights out of its readers for one particular reason: the depiction of a totalitarian state where the government, better known as the party, watched everything through various forms of mass surveillance. Most notably a vast network of telescreens that watched you, listened to you, and even when you thought you were out of harm's reach, there was always one watching you. It was published over 75 years ago, and was a warning to the world about the brutality of a tyrannical police state, with many people drawing similarities between the book and parts of the Soviet Union at that time. But today, in cities, towns and suburbs across the United States, a network of small black cameras, now well over 100,000 strong, are slowly building a giant centralised database of car licence plates, and perhaps even more, and sharing it with over 5,000 law enforcement agencies across 49 states. And it's no coincidence that the company building this decided to call themselves Flock. They think they can get away with what they're doing because they see ordinary regular people as nothing more than a herd of sheep. Flock Safety was founded in 2017 by Garrett Langley, Matt Fury and Paige Todd, and started with a seemingly pleasant mission to help solve crimes and make America safer. But nearly 10 years since its inception, the company has grown into a widespread surveillance network that now performs over 20 billion vehicle scans every single month. You run the numbers, and that's 2 scans on every American citizen every single day. A site called DFlock, created by a man aptly named Will Freeman in later 2024, created a map showing all the different locations of Flock cameras and puts today's estimate at around 129,000 cameras across the states. And this has all happened in just 9 years. Although Flock cameras are often referred to as merely automatic license plate readers, this is awfully misleading. Reading license plates is their main task, of course, but they can also be used to track just about anyone or anything. The cameras use AI to scan every vehicle that passes by, uploading not just the plate number but the model, colour and even bumper stickers to what is now America's largest vehicle surveillance database. But despite recent backlash and a number of police departments scaling back their connections to Flock, the company is being backed by some pretty big names in private equity, especially one face who nobody can seem to forget. In March 2025, Flock raised $275 million in a funding round led by this Humpty Dumpty looking motherfucker called Mark Andreessen, valuing the company at around $7.5 billion. By April of this year, that valuation had climbed to $8.4 billion. Andreessen described Flock as a one-in-a-generation business, once again jumping onto the bandwagon of promoting this surveillance network under the guise of keeping people safe. Because there's nothing that makes me feel safer than having a company funded by a man who sat in front of a camera and bragged about the fact he has no introspection whatsoever, tracking my every move. In Orwell's dystopia, the party constantly justifies using telescreens to spy on people by continuously referring to the need to oust enemies of the party, whether it be part of Goldstein's revolution, the threat of another region like Eurasia, or any form of thought crime that people had in the comfort of their own homes. The telescreens were never spoken about as a weapon for control. They were spoken about as necessary instruments of safety, and Flock's CEO is saying the exact same stuff. Their website, with their wonderfully pleasant imagery and rhetoric, describes its cameras as protecting communities, recovering stolen vehicles, finding missing children, and generally helping law enforcement. And it's true, these are real use cases. They are also, for Orwell, exactly the kind of justifications that make surveillance infrastructure so dangerous. It genuinely does solve the problems it advertises, which makes it almost impossible to oppose without being accused of favouring crime over safety. So I guess it raises a rather important question. Are you willing to sacrifice your privacy for more safety? I want to be fair to Flock Safety, at least in some regard, and the law enforcement agencies that use it, because their use cases are legit. In San Francisco in 2025, crime fell by 25% in a single year, and homicides hit their lowest level in 70 years. On top of that, according to the National Insurance Crime Bureau, nearly 660,000 vehicles were stolen in the US in 2025. That's one every 48 seconds. And Flock's technology provides searchable vehicle evidence that helps investigators identify leads. But in 1984, Orwell never argued that the party's surveillance state produced no results. In fact, the thought police were highly effective. Crime in Oceania was, by the party's own account, exceptionally low. The question was never whether the system worked at catching criminals. The question was what kind of life were the other 99% living? All the ordinary, decent people who don't have a bad bone in their body and just want to live a normal life. And when you have their investors also piling tons of money into politics too, it asks a pretty scary question. Who gets to decide what really constitutes as a crime? That's why Orwell's thought crimes are still so scary today. And that's where Flock's agenda goes from an inconvenience into a horrifying possibility, because a terrifying conflict of interest and a terrifying financial incentive is on the cards here. The more Flock cameras that are sold to police departments, the more money people like Humpty Dumpty will make. And the more crime there is, the bigger the need to have more Flock cameras. So in a way, this man is incentivized to pay politicians to criminalize more and more things, creating a society that is less and less free, and creating an ever-growing need for Flock cameras, and filling his pockets with billions of dollars in the process. In plain English, Flock investors have manufactured a financial incentive to turn America into a surveillance state for their profit.
In order to increase the value of their company, they need to take more people's data, invade their privacy more, and share it more broadly. And although they may say things like, we have certain methods in place and systems in place to prevent broader data sharing to make sure it's not misused, that is all simple public relations response. Their venture capitalist investors who want to receive massive returns on their investment have forced Flock's hand and say we need to put the pedal to the metal, violate privacy as much as possible. If doing that will increase our profits, and there's a direct correlation between more monitoring, more surveillance, more data collection, more data sharing, and more profits.
And when you have a country run by a dodgy businessman who will do anything for money, there's reason to believe that Americans today are on the cusp of an all-out police state. That is exactly how the world of 1984 came about. And that conflict of interest between Andreessen and Flock, and Andreessen and the Republican Party, needs to be spoken about way more. Because the more money Andreessen can make from Flock, whose biggest customers are United States law enforcement, the more money he can give to Trump, creating perhaps the scariest conflict of interest in the history of private enterprise. And if that isn't scary enough, then there's all the cases of police officers abusing their powers by using Flock cameras to harass and stalk people. The system designed to catch criminals is now just being used to track people who did absolutely nothing wrong, which leads us perfectly onto another concept created by Orwell, doublespeak. Doublespeak is the ability to simultaneously hold two contradictory beliefs and accept both as true through a process of brainwashing conducted in the book by the party. And right now, in the United States, something similar is happening. When talking about DFlock, the website that mapped all of Flock's cameras, Flock's CEO, Garrett Langley, literally described the website as terroristic.
And then unfortunately there's terroristic organizations, like DFlock, whose primary motivation is chaos. They are closer to Antifa than they are anything else. And that, I think, is unfortunate, because we don't want chaos, or I don't want chaos. I like law and order.
Yep. According to the CEO of Flock, a database showing where Flock cameras are located is described as terrorism, but the database that Flock is building up, one that tracks the movements of innocent people at a scale never seen before in human history, is not only not deemed as terrorism, but it's actually necessary for people's safety. This is the modern equivalent of doublespeak, and it's hypocrisy on another scale. George Orwell wrote 1984 not necessarily as a prediction, but as a warning about tendencies he could already see in the world taking shape after the Second World War. He was depicting how easily power can be corrupted, and how systems that may have been built with good intentions can become tools of control, the way that rhetoric around safety and security is often used to justify invasions of privacy, and the way that the accumulation of information about people becomes, inevitably, a tool for managing those people if it gets into the wrong hands.
If you want a vision of the future, Winston, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever.
only sometimes it doesn't look like a boot. It looks like a small black camera on a lamppost with a solar panel in a quiet American suburb, promising to keep your neighbourhood safe. There's a case to be made that this really is the modern day telescreen. Flock safety is not a mirror image of the party in 1984. Garrett Langley isn't Big Brother, although like I said earlier, he does look eerily like Syndrome. But regardless of this, Flock has built something that functions as infrastructure for exactly the kind of control Orwell became famous for writing about, and the trajectory of its expansion, its investor base, its integration with immigration enforcement, and its resistance to democratic oversight all point in directions that Orwell would have found familiar, and it's especially scary in a world where democracy is proving to be the most fragile it has been in decades. Again, Flock operates in over 5,000 communities across 49 states, the only state it isn't in being Alaska, serving more than 5,000 law enforcement agencies, and performing over 20 billion vehicle scans every month. 20 billion scans every single month. That's twice a day. Every single American is being scanned and their movements logged to a database funded by billionaires. And whilst we all see videos of people cutting down Flock cameras in a valiant sign of rebellion, just remember this. It wasn't the telescreens that made Winston Smith guilty of a thought crime. Just how it isn't Flock cameras themselves aren't the real invasion of privacy. It was the party that made Winston guilty, and the telescreens were just the tool. It's the people behind the scenes who are invading your privacy, and the cameras are just there to take the blame. You shouldn't hate the tool, but the tool makers on the other hand are where your attention needs to be. But there is good news, because some police departments are starting to push back. In the past 5 years, 82 Flock contracts were terminated in 28 states, including 39 between January and May of this year alone. Over 95 cities in both blue and red states have either rejected or cancelled Flock contracts. The ACLU and Electronic Frontier Foundation have filed lawsuits challenging the technology as unconstitutional. They say the Fourth Amendment protects American citizens against unreasonable searches, a system that creates a searchable record of every American driver's historical movements, without a warrant, without probable cause, and without any individual suspicion is, many will say, an unreasonable search conducted on every person in the country simultaneously. In 1984, the party's most effective weapon wasn't violence against its people, it was the erosion of the idea that a private life possible, or even moral. Nothing was your own except the few cubic centimetres inside your skull, Orwell wrote. And in a world where we're surrounded by Flock cameras, meta glasses, and all manner of devices that seem to know way too much about us, this might have actually become a reality. The people who called Flock dangerous, unlawful, a violation of Americans' constitutional rights, aren't exaggerating. If anything, they're just educated. They've read books like Orwell's 1984 and are arriving at the same conclusion that he did all those years ago. That surveillance infrastructure once built can be very hard to destroy because of the power it gives to those in charge over those who aren't. And when there are severe conflict of interests between some of Flock's wealthiest investors and some of America's biggest political donors, people's fears of this company are not only tolerable, but necessary as to potentially prevent the world of 1984 from becoming a reality. There's a good reason 1984 remains one of the most read novels in the world, more than 3/4 of a decade after it was published. Not because Orwell was a prophet, but because the themes he wrote about, the creeping normalisation of surveillance, the rhetoric of safety used to justify control, the gradual disappearance of the private life, the institutional indifference to individual rights, aren't made-up fantasies. They're recurring patterns that occur when too much power gets into the wrong hands. The cameras are already there. Over 100,000 of them. The database already exists, collecting hundreds of millions of snapshots every single day. The data is already being shared with agencies you didn't vote for, to enforce policies you weren't asked about, on movements you didn't know were being recorded, and Flock is the perfect example to back up the fact that 1984 is still one of the most important pieces of literature ever written. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this really is good for us. Maybe we should all just drop the saws and worship the cameras that keep us safe, as Big Brother would have intended. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe for more videos like this one.